Tech News Weekly is sponsored by Hover.com. Go to gfu.hover.com and get 10% off your entire purchase. FreshBooks. FreshBooks is an easy-to-use online invoicing service that saves you time, gets you paid faster, and makes you look professional. Get started completely for free at freshbooks.com. And by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook by going to audiblepodcast.com/GFQ.
Starting Tech News Weekly in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome, everybody, to Tech News Weekly. I am Andrew Zarian. I'm joined by my very special guest. This is not What the Tech. It is not a Tuesday. This is a Friday, and I'm joined by Paul Thurrott, the wonderful, magical man of international flight, Paul Thurrott.
This is a totally different show.
Totally different show. And I guarantee you tomorrow people are going to be very confused on both our sites.
I know.
The reason why we're doing this on actually Paul is on the show is because we missed What the Tech last week because Paul was in Spain, right?
Yes, I was in Barcelona.
In Barcelona. Actually, did you go to a Real Madrid game?
I went to a FCB game, like a football club Barcelona game.
Did you enjoy it or were you bored?
Actually, I enjoyed it a lot. It was great. You know, live sports is like live music. It's almost always really good.
Okay.
And I'm not a soccer fan in any way because, you know, I'm an American. But actually, it was fantastic. And that place is humongous. It's like 100,000 people.
Yeah.
It was great. It was a really good game.
So you got back on Wednesday, right?
We got back on Wednesday. Yep.
Yeah, so it would have been too late. But that's why Paul is here today. And there's a lot of stuff to cover, of course. And I thought who better than Paul Thurrott and myself to cover it this week.
That's right.
We know everything here, apparently. And I just want to say before we get into the news that I love the fact that I could get DLL errors in 2012.
As I was just saying, I have not seen one of those in a long time. You don't have like a picture of it, do you?
No, it just said access violation. And
so it was a little dialogue that came up?
Yeah, a little dialogue box. And it told me like a bunch of numbers, whatever the access violation code is. And then it told me whatever file that crashed.
It's like you're traveling here from the past.
I'm actually from 1995, Paul.
Yeah, exactly.
Microsoft has sent me to
this is why they got rid of Windows 98.
Yeah.
I haven't seen an error like that in forever.
Well, the software that I use, it's always in beta. I mean, they have a final version, but we're always using the beta because they're constantly getting better with the software. So certain betas are phenomenal. Other ones are not so great. You have to be very careful with what you're using. And that's a problem that I have right now. I'm on a beta.
Pretty much, that's all that thing does, right? That's the one
it
function
does.
of that PC?
Well, it does. This is all that this PC does is just do the video production.
So do you reboot it every day, basically?
I used to reboot it after every show. So even if I had a show right after, I used to reboot it just to make sure nothing crashed. I haven't rebooted this machine in about 3 days.
So it's your fault.
It's my fault. Yeah. Yeah. Wednesday was the last day that I did a reboot on this.
Right.
But
it's interesting. It's sort of a blast from the past for me. It's weird. I can't remember. I don't know when I've seen it. It's been a long time.
I actually just did a format on this, and everything was fine. I'm actually really surprised that I still got that error.
Right.
That's an
this
error
is the format you did over the holiday, right?
Yeah. Over when did I format it? Recently.
Yeah, like
there was a holiday.
January or
I guess. I don't know. I don't know what holiday it was.
I can't. I'm so lost. Between the travel and everything, I'm just. I have no conception of time.
So you were in Barcelona, and actually now everybody's going to Barcelona.
Now that I have good timing in that way.
Did you do that intentionally? Did you not want to be there during the entire event?
No, I actually last year we went to Spain as well, but we went to Madrid, and when we were in Madrid, that was the week of Mobile World Congress, which is always in Barcelona. So I booked Barcelona because we'd always wanted to go, and I figured, well, what the heck, if Mobile World Congress is the same week this week, well, maybe I'll go for a day. But actually, it's It was the week later. So I don't know why, but that's just the way it worked out. But we always go for the kids' vacation school week.
Well, at least it was a nice trip.
Yeah, it worked out well. I mean, we had a little kind of a rocky beginning because there was a pilot strike at Iberia that impacted our trip there. But other than that, it was fine. So.
But to get to news, Paul, because
Yes.
that's what everybody's here for. A lot of stuff happened, actually. A lot of not so gadgety news, and we've been covering a lot of this. We covered a lot of the tablets and Windows and the Mac and everything else. But there's a lot of stuff going on. And one big thing has been online privacy.
Yep.
The Obama administration is proposing a consumer bill of rights for online data. This is coming out of, I guess this is coming out of the whole story where Google was getting data and on the iPhones, and so now a lot of people have been saying, well, what are they getting? What are they supposed to take from us? What are they doing with the information they get from us? Right. Whenever I browse, even if I'm logged off from Google, like from the login, I always think to myself, you know what? They know what I'm looking at.
They do.
I mean that's the reality of it. I mean, they could. Everything that you do online is somehow going to come back to you.
Yeah. It's funny. This is not a new issue. Years and years ago, when Microsoft was involved in their antitrust stuff in the United States, Scott McNealy was the CEO of Sun Microsystems, right? And it was one of the most outspoken critics of Microsoft. He hated Microsoft.
Oh my God! It was every week he was just bashing.
Yeah, and I saw him live one time, probably at Comdex, and this would have been 10 years ago or something. I found him to be an amazingly compelling speaker, but he reiterated a point which he had made infamous earlier, even than that speech, where he had said, "Look, you gave up your privacy by going online a long time ago. Just get over it." And that was 10 years ago, right? Yeah. I mean, he couldn't have foreseen the way these things have evolved. And more and more we do all of our computing online, not so much Windows based on a PC or Mac based on a Mac or whatever. It's a lot of the stuff we do is tied up in these cloud services and is done within web browsers.
Well, not just with the browser, Paul, but I mean, every phone has a GPS, and all these people are using programs like Foursquare and these coupon check-in websites. They know where you are at all times if you're using these services. Really, there's no anonymity. I mean, everything that you're doing is public.
They're not doing it to make your life easier. They're doing it, to make money. And so hopefully both things can occur, but yeah, I think this is going to be a fundamental fight of this generation, I would say, because this is, something that we need to really rectify and understand. I don't think people get it. I think this stuff is still so new.
The White House has announced that Google, Yahoo, Microsoft, and AOL, and some others actually, have agreed to submit a do not track technology to provide consumers with the means to control their online privacy. All right, and I'm going to go down to things that they're kind of asking for, but I don't think that's a bigger deal than people. I'll give you one example. There are a lot of where Find My Car applications.
Yep.
There's like a million of them. And every time, and I don't think people really understand how that works, but every time, I mean, our viewers do, but most people don't. You're sending, it's going based on GPS. It's looking at your coordinates, and you're sending this information to some company. That company could sell that information, and they'll know that X amount of people on this day, and I'm sure you gave some sort of information like your email or whatever. They know that you went to the mall. They know your daily procedures.
I think that the sheer amount of stuff that people do in the course of a day that's tracked, I don't think they have any idea. And anyone who has used an Android phone, especially, where you download an app and a screen comes up and it says, "Hey, by the way, this app needs this information," and there's some kind of a list. And it's just like that stuff we used to do in Windows where the EULA would come up, the license agreements, and people go, yeah, click OK. And you do that all the time when you install a software application, for example. No one ever actually reads it, And in the case of a smartphone, that can be pretty dangerous,
What do you think is more dangerous? I mean, that the fact that the Google and AOL and whoever else knows what you're looking at online, or the fact that you're able to be tracked, your daily activities are able to be tracked minute by minute if you are constantly using these services?
So actually, I mean, there's all kinds of problems here. I think about someone who commutes every day, and maybe they have an app on their phone where they can pay for parking, before they get on the commuter rail or whatever and go into the city and they work, and that's the start of the tracking, something happens or something goes wrong, and law enforcement officials can subpoena all of that data, I would imagine, and find out and track your movements in ways that I think a lot of people would consider to be science fiction. Google will tell you that the tracking they do, and they probably don't call it tracking exactly, but that the data they're collecting is anonymous, and it probably is to some degree and so forth. But I think the important thing that's going to come out of this is simply, well, one is awareness, and two is the sort of nipping this thing in the bud aspect, where someday we're going to look back and laugh that we allowed ourselves to be this open about what we were doing without even knowing it. It's like wearing a seatbelt in a car, that car makers fought that for years and years because of the expense it would add to the vehicle. And now it's inconceivable that we wouldn't have that protection.
Some of the proposed Bill of Rights for online, privacy has 6 areas of online data management, transparency, company policies regarding the security, and should be easily understandable by consumers, respect of contacts, security, access and accuracy, focus collection, and accountability. These are the 6 focuses of this, 6 focused areas, I should say, of this proposed bill. You know what? At first I was saying, I kind of don't want the government involved, but it's not an awful thing. It's kind of saying, listen, we're not telling you what to do. We're just saying, if this is what you're going to do, you have to let the user know.
I would be a little leery of anyone who took the anti-government approach to this argument. I mean, are you kidding me?
I mean, there's a lot of people.
This is something the government should be doing. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, the primary purpose of the federal government is to protect its citizens, right? And that doesn't just involve pointing a gun at an enemy. It's this stuff. I think this is very much, regardless of your political leanings, within the context of what our government should be doing, right? Protecting its citizens.
Mm-hmm. I'm looking here at the complaints that people have, and they're saying, well, how is the government going to enforce services outside of the country? And I said, well, they really can't, but if these are American companies, they're going to follow this procedure, so it's going to be better for everybody.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, that's pretty much how it works. They're not saying you're not allowed to run your business. They're saying, well, be more transparent about what you're doing every day.
Technology moves so quickly that we're always catching up, to how this stuff works. If you remember back, and this is only semi-related, but when the iPhone first came out, people would buy it in the United States in 2007, and then they would fly to Europe, and they would come back, and they would have some like $3,000 phone bill because there just wasn't the sophistication to alert the user that, oh, by the way, you're roaming internationally. This is going to be super expensive. AT&T at the time didn't have international plans that worked on the iPhone, and et cetera, et cetera. If you fly to Europe today, Verizon, AT&T, whatever, the phone, it's the second it detects that it's international, it sends up a message that says, look, you're in this place. It could be very expensive. It's kind of a good example of how things catch up, and I think the nice thing about what's happening here with this Consumer Bill of Rights is that, honestly, in the scope of the federal government, it's moving pretty quickly to address something that is a need literally right now, It's not 2 years after the fact.
Yeah,
so.
And again, to me, I really don't think that the issue with the privacy aspect of web browsing is the web browser or the search engines. I don't think that's as much of an issue as the mobile devices being able to track everywhere that you're going, and most people not understanding how that works. Google has a service out there that pretty much it'll ping where you are at all times. And you can look on the map, and all your friends can know where you are. I mean, and people are doing this. A lot of the data can potentially be used and sold off for whatever marketing.
But is it personal data? Amazon has your account information, so you go to Amazon and you buy stuff, and then it makes recommendations, right? Amazon, for some reason, started emailing me offers. I was shopping around for computers recently, so. All of a sudden now I get all these emails from Amazon that are about computers that I don't actually care about, but they send me these emails now. And I think, well, okay, that's okay because I go there.
Every service does it, Paul. I mean, Netflix does it.
Yeah. But when this becomes scary, though, is when there's some kind of a backroom deal between, say, Amazon and some other company. If Amazon was like Google and made money selling ads, I mean, I could potentially get ads for computer deals, in this case, from other companies. And then you would look at those and be like, why did I get that?
Yeah.
following the trail is difficult, today. And I think that the point behind this do not track technology,
which, by the way, that's the next story. Google has agreed to put a do not track button on their one of their next web browser
belatedly,
releases.
By the way. I mean,
Mozilla's
Mozilla
been
did
doing
it first. IE did it. Microsoft and Apple did it.
Do you
already.
ever use that? I mean, and I'll ask the chat room too, and the chat room could, say yes or no. Do you use the do not track or the private browsing setting on your browser? I've never used it. Have you used it, Paul?
No, I don't. But I think it's important that it's there. I think it's important that, by the way, Chrome today already has a private browsing thing. I think that's a different deal.
Yeah.
I think the point behind do not track is it's something that you can enable as a global default, that I will always not be tracked essentially by third-party sites. The reason that Google got in trouble recently.
What is Mozilla calling it? I thought Mozilla calls it private browsing.
So all of the browsers, I believe, I'm not sure about Safari, but I know that Mozilla and Chrome and IE all have some form of private browsing. They all call it something a little different, but I don't believe that that's what this is. I don't think do not track is this. The IE equivalent of do not track is the tracking protection list technology that's built into the latest version of IE. And that it kind of works like a whitelist, blacklist kind of a thing. You have to opt into it. You have to choose which list or lists you're going to use. Mm-hmm. You can be very paranoid or not. That's your choice. And I think my understanding of this is that Google will do something like that. That the tracking protection list technology in Microsoft's browser was essentially a reaction to the first call for do not track technology, which I think came from the FTC or the FCC, both, which I always confuse, about a year ago. I believe it's something like that. So what's happening I think what happened this week was simply that Google lagged behind the other browser makers in agreeing to do this. They did. And I'm not sure of the timing why the Obama administration is now proposing this. Maybe it's just taken this amount of time to formalize this. I don't actually believe that this was inspired by Google's activities this past week. I think it was.
I thought, I'm trying to find it in Firefox. I thought that it was that button in Firefox. I guess it's not. It's something else.
Yeah, I never use Firefox except to test. But let me see if I can find it.
I'm curious on what it is in Firefox. Whatever it is, but
it's called private browsing.
Private browsing. Okay.
Yeah.
It's interesting that they're all. This is a hot issue now, considering I thought they were all doing it at this point.
Well, they were all doing it. Well, no, they were except for Google. So Google's still not doing it. Google has private browsing. That's not the same thing. In other words, private browsing is for this window only. I'm gonna not be tracked. It's like a mode, like a special mode.
Yeah.
In Internet Explorer, which is the only one I'm really slightly familiar with, their tracking protection is something that's on globally. It has nothing to do with private browsing. This is the way the browser always is.
I'm still surprised that this became an issue now.
Well, the reason, I don't know, I can't explain why the Obama administration proposed this right now. But as far as the Google stuff goes, obviously it's sort of a tasty news story. So it's sort of broadcast everywhere. And Microsoft, to their credit, went nuts over it and really tried to use it as a competitive advantage thing. But there is something a little. I think there's always been this underlying thing with Google where you kind of don't trust them, where you're looking at your Gmail email and over on the right is an ad or a series of ads that are based on keywords in the email that you're reading, which is a little creepy, Yeah. And the stuff that they did in Safari and to a lesser degree in IE is, it's kind of sneaky. I think that for some people, if you have even a slightly jaundiced view of things, you look at that and you're like, I already don't kind of trust these guys, and this kind of puts it over the top.
I mean, I'm always, and maybe I'm one of the few, but I kind of understand how this works, and I'm assuming already that all my information is going out there. So every time I buy, sub whatever online, I'm not surprised when I see an ad asking if I want to purchase that.
Yep.
I think a lot of us are conditioned to accept it, but does that mean that
yes, exactly.
it's the right way of doing it?
It's just like the license agreement. After a while, you're like, you know what? I'm not reading this. And
I like how one part is that transparency, that the company's policies should be easy to understand. I mean, does that mean that we're going to get these terms of services that are like simple for the average person? No, we're not going to get that. I don't think anything is going to change really. They're telling you what they're doing. You're just not reading it.
Right, and you never will. I mean, let's be honest about that. No one's ever going to do it. But that's why. It's actually why I think the government intervention stuff is kind of important. I mean, like I said, this is a good example of where the government can be useful, because if this works and if this makes sense, and if all these companies have to do it, or at least agree to do it, I don't have to read those things anymore. Like, I can trust that this thing is not tracking me anymore. Google is probably not going to go out of their way to make it really easy to turn off tracking, but at least they're going to do it. And if you're an educated consumer, you can take advantage of it.
Sure. One story that I really wanted your opinion on this, because we always cover the tablet stuff and the mobile computing. And one topic that came up a couple weeks ago on What the Tech when we were doing it. By the way, this is Tech News Weekly. Don't think you're seeing the screen wrong. We are doing our Friday show with Paul because Paul was gone, and this is the only day he's available. He's a busy man. And I had to schedule him in, so he's on this show this week. Next week, everything else will be to normal. Our schedule, Tuesdays, we'll be doing What the Tech, and we'll be doing our regular Friday Tech News Weekly. Ubuntu and Android are kind of merging into this one device, they're using, and I'm going to go into the story, but it's a desktop and a mobile OS in one device. And last week we were talking about the separation.
Right.
And and how these OSs have kind of combined, and now we're seeing the opposite, where they're separating. The Windows is going to a unified operating system across all platforms slowly. I mean, except for the phone, but the phone is still using components of Windows 8, so in due time it'll be the same thing. And that's where Apple's headed also. But this is an interesting concept that Ubuntu will be running on the Android kernel, and you could pretty much take the phone, dock it, and you'll be running a full version of Linux on your monitor.
Wow. Who would want to do that?
By the way, people don't like the Unity UI. I like Unity. I'm not against Unity. I mean, I haven't tried it yet. I actually need to install it. I haven't downloaded, but I would like to use the latest version of it. I don't know. Maybe this is not that bad of a thing, and this is kind of more appealing to me than I do. You remember that Atrix that came out a while ago, and it's like this dumbed down version of Android on your desktop? I would rather want this than that.
Well, okay. Except, this is one of those when you're a hammer, everything you see is a nail kind of things. I mean, Canonical makes Ubuntu, and the future of computing is moving away from these desktop OSs, and Android is clearly taking off in the mobile space, and it may be based on Linux, but it's not Linux, right? I mean, I think it's telling that the only time that Linux was ever successful was when they made it look nothing like Linux.
Yeah, when it made it extremely pretty.
Yeah, I think that the better future for this kind of device is going to be when Google inevitably gets rid of Chrome OS and makes Android more suitable for these kind of bigger screen environments.
Yeah.
I mean, they've already done some work for tablets and stuff. I don't think it's a big leap.
But it's not that great. I mean, it's not great.
It's not great today, but I don't think there's any real call in the market for Linux at all.
See, here's a question for you, Paul. Do you think it's easier for Microsoft to understand coming from a desktop OS mentality, like a standard operating system, and going down to a mobile platform, or is it easier to go from a mobile platform to a desktop environment? I'm just curious about that because it's very different.
You got to remember, nobody is starting from that point today, except for Canonical.
Yeah.
Microsoft did this work in the mid 1990s when they made the first version of Windows CE, right? They created at the time a componentized version of Windows that would run on different hardware platform, and they called it Windows CE, and that evolved into Pocket PC and eventually into Windows Mobile. And now we have a system called Windows Phone that runs on sort of a Windows CE base, if you will, a different UI and all that. But so at the beginning of that, they had a desktop OS and they turned it into this componentized mobile thing. Apple did the same exact thing with the iPhone. They took the core of Mac OS X, They whittled off the stuff they didn't need. They added a bunch of touch things that they did need, and they came up with the iPhone. It was really the same thing that Microsoft had done 10 or more years earlier. Now Apple has taken things in an interesting other direction, where they've taken that very fine-tuned small mobile OS and they're turning it into a general purpose computing operating system in iOS for the iPad. That's interesting. So I think there's some benefits to both approaches. Microsoft has a much bigger market that it's starting with, so they can't really be that aggressive by destroying backwards compatibility and so forth. Or making the developer environment completely different.
But is this type of mobile computing the future of mobile computing, where you take your phone, you have one? I mean, you could pretty much have one device, and if in the future, let's say Windows, they're running a Windows 8 on these phones, you just take it, you dock it, and there you go. Now you have an ARM version of Windows 8 on a monitor, and you just get a keyboard.
It's hard to say. I mean.
Or do you think we won't be?
I wrote today
doing
about that. And this is actually, I don't want to get ahead of myself because I have this as a pick today. But what if pervasive connectivity in cloud computing was the platform? That every surface in your home or workplace could be a computing device of some kind. Right now, in the old days, we used to think of software as this thing that came on like a disk of some kind, and we would, plug it into something and use it. And then eventually the computer became the thing, and like we would store everything on this PC, and it was like the one place that had all our stuff. But eventually you get connected, and then you want to access all your stuff from different locations. So today we have smartphones, we have tablet type devices, we have full-fledged computers, we have smart TVs, we have all these video game machines. All these different devices that can access and display your data from anywhere. And this thing strikes me as, when you make smartphones, you see that as the platform, and you turn it into a laptop because you feel like some customers need more stuff. Yeah. Google is a web services company. Everything they do is web services based. Canonical makes Linux, so their thing is like Linux based. I mean, it really just kind of depends on where you're coming from. I mean, I think that's kind of ultimately it. Which one's going to win? I'm sure it's going to be some combination of these things.
I think, in the long run, it seems like we're kind of evolving computing into this one device. I mean, if they're saying quad core CPUs on these phones by the end of the year,
yep,
you're going to be able to. I mean, that's faster than what most people have at home.
Well, but it's always been like that. The Commodore 64 was more computing power than the Apollo spacecraft had.
Sure, yeah.
Or whatever. I mean, so that's always been. That's the nature of our business. These things are always going to get smaller and thinner and more powerful, and there'll be more computing power in things that we didn't have before. A watch or a toaster or a refrigerator that can automatically order milk when it recognizes that you pulled the milk out but never put it back.
Yeah,
that kind of stuff. So that's the natural evolution. I mean,
so you're not too crazy about the phone becoming your computer?
No, I think that there's no doubt that there will be acceptable versions of such a thing, and maybe that will happen this year. I can tell you from my own personal experience. I mean, and I should say from my own personal needs, that a Windows phone that was based on Windows 8 would be far more desirable to me in that capacity than an Android phone that was also Linux, on a desktop. Just for me. And I would imagine for many businesses as well. Individuals a lot of people would be happy just to have an iPad that they could use as a computer and a separate phone. I think there'll be a lot of stuff.
The future of Linux, to me, will probably end up, and this is just my guess as of right now, will probably end up being the extreme computer user, not the everyday user, but the person that likes to fiddle around with things. In the next couple of years, after we become this closed-in UI, where everything is one unified operating system, the iPad operating system iOS will probably be what, OS X is, or whatever, OS 10, whatever they're going to call the next version, where everything kind of becomes one. The enthusiasts will probably be more attracted to Linux than this.
I mean, to me, that's what Linux has always been,
Yeah,
Linux's role changes at all.
No.
It's people will say, oh, Linux, it took off because it's that's what Android really is, and it's like, no, Android didn't take off because it was Linux.
Android
took off in some ways because it wasn't Linux.
Yeah.
The Mac OS 10, for example, is far more successful than Linux will ever be. And it is, in its own way, sort of a niche thing. But as the basis for iOS, I mean, that's a fairly dominant platform right there. And so it's a different thing. Apple's had much more success with iOS than it ever had with OS 10, despite over a decade, really, two, if you want to go back to Next, of work.
Yeah. I do want to continue, but I do want to thank our sponsor, hover.com, domain names made simple. Last night I actually bought a domain, and I'm a big fan of these .cos. Everybody's getting .cos. I actually own paulthurrott.co, which I am forwarding to your website, I think. Or maybe not. I don't know. I should be, Paul. I'm a big fan of the .cos, and right now at Hover, they're 50% off. You get them for $15 plus the 10% off if you go to gfq.hover.com. But the great thing about Hover is that they do not upsell you, that you're not going to get bombarded with emails telling you to do private registration, because that's included, to do certified registration, to do business registration. Everything is included in that one price. So when you're checking out, you know what you're buying, rather than going to a website thinking you're going to spend about $10 and you end up checking out with $30. None of that happens at Hover. It's easy to use, very simple user interface. They make it as easy as they can. And right now, if you go to gfq.hover.com, you can get 10% off your entire purchase, or you could use promo code GFQ upon checkout. I'm a big fan of Hover. I have about almost 200 domains at this point. I've lost track. I have a problem. I have a serious problem with domain names. And you could have a problem, too, if you go to hover.com. Thank you, Hover, for sponsoring Tech News Weekly. And back to you, Paul. One thing we are talking about these UIs, and we are talking about the mobile UIs. Mozilla's getting in the game, and they partnered with LG with their own device. Mozilla's getting in the mobile operating system game. Have you seen the images?
Yeah.
What do you think of it?
It looks fine, but I mean, Mozilla, Canonical, has a little bit of a problem, which is that they're not necessarily going to make this transition very well. All of the major mobile platforms, iOS, Android, and then the lesser ones today, like Windows Phone and so forth, have built-in browsers. And actually, on those three platforms in particular, those built-in browsers work really, really well. And that's a tough place for them to be. And I think that's why you're seeing them work with a hardware company on a mobile OS, because it may be their only chance to get their mobile stuff out there.
What do they call Ubuntu Gecko? Is that what they're calling it? I'm trying to pull it up again. LG building the first. Mozilla. I can't find the story now. Great.
Boot to Gecko, yeah.
Boot to Gecko, yeah. I don't know. Do you think that there's any room left in the market? I don't think there's a lot of room left in the market. And we saw that with WebOS, the collapse of WebOS. There's really not too much room left in the market.
Firefox had a nice moment in the sun on Windows in particular, and just in general PC computing. But with the advent of Chrome and so forth, I think that is over. And I just don't see a spot for them in the mobile world. I just don't see it happening.
So let's play devil's advocate now with the merger or the buyout being approved of Motorola Mobility and Google. Mm-hmm. If Google starts playing favorites with their own company, which is Motorola Mobility, can we see companies like LG and HTC, and we've discussed this in the past, looking for some other option?
Yeah, but you don't have a lot of choices there, right?
I mean,
Windows
that's the
Phone
only
may
way.
be a good option, but
which they are making. I mean, LG is making a Windows Phone, right?
Yeah, but it's really half-hearted, and I think with the Nokia and their very special arrangement with Microsoft, it's not a pretty place to be for a lot of the other companies. So where do you go from there? I mean, we talked about this on the other show. WebOS is technically excellent, is beautiful to look at. All things being equal, would be a kind of a great system for people to support, but I think that too has seen its moment pass.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Nokia is obviously the favorite of Windows Phone. They are the number one Windows Phone on the market, right? They took the position of being the most sold Windows Phone.
Yep. Yeah. In just 2 months, they sold devices in a very limited capacity, just in November and December, and are already have apparently become the number one.
Yeah, they've beat Samsung, which I think at that point was the number one
In HTC.
in HTC. So they've surpassed them. So everybody has their favorite manufacturer now. I don't know. Companies like LG might be left out in the wind in the next couple of years if this continues, this trend continues, and then maybe they're looking for an option, plan B if something were to happen. That's the only reason why I could see this surviving in any possible level. Other than that, there's no way that we're going to have another room for another contender in the mobile market like this. Currently, at this moment.
And certainly Google as a partner has some issues, right? I mean, like you said, what if they do make Motorola Mobility the special partner, as they do own them and so forth. And I think maybe the bigger issue is simply that Android may need to become less fragmented, and that may require them to bring stuff in-house a little bit more than they have. I mean, it's true that their current strategy has gotten them to where they are, but maybe to give this thing legs for the long term, they need, kind of a less open approach, frankly.
But their current strategy worked in the beginning because they kind of wanted to saturate the market as much as they could with the operating system because they wanted to play the numbers game. It wasn't really the quality of the phone or the quality of the operating system. It was just, let's put this on everything and get the market, and then we'll worry about it later. But now they do have the market share, and it's still extremely fragmented when you're looking at phones. Some are running Gingerbread, some are running Froyo, some are running... nobody's running Ice Cream Sandwich right now, which is bizarre to me. So they have to kind of bring it back in and kind of get more control over this because it's going to affect them in the long run when there's 10 different Android phones on the market and every one of them has a different operating system and every one of them has a different UI. So it kind of hurts your brand after a while.
I guess so. It's funny. Microsoft and Apple both are very closed environments. Apple has done, phenomenally well, but they do sell 3 different iPhone models today, and so you could argue there's some fragmentation there. You certainly don't get all of the iOS 5 features on the iPhone 4, or to a greater extent on the 3GS. Some people have argued, I think, pretty effectively that Microsoft needs maybe more fragmentation with Windows Phone, and my understanding of the way that device is going to go this year is that will happen.
Let's just imagine that Windows in the 90s decided that every manufacturer, let's say Dell, Gateway, HP, Acer, whoever else, could put their own skin on top of Windows, and they don't need to run. Not everybody's going to run Windows 98. You could have Windows 95. You could have Windows XP. You could have Windows 98. Imagine if that market continued like that. I know in Windows it doesn't really because everybody upgrades to the next version, but imagine if everybody had their own custom version of Windows, what would have happened to the market?
Right.
That's just how I see it. I don't understand the mentality where everybody's doing their own thing with this version.
It's not clear that the mobile market is going to parallel the PC market very effectively. Microsoft, though, obviously saw great success with Windows because they licensed the OS so widely to so many companies. So that worked out for them. On the other hand, the Mac did persevere. It survived through that. It obviously is a very successful business, and Apple has very closely reined in, Mac OS 10 to be very consistent.
So who's right?
I don't know that you can say one is right. They both are successful models, and in the mobile world, it's happening again. iOS has done very well, even in the face of hundreds of Android, competitors that as a whole have outsold them by and large. But, the iPhone 4S or whatever the current version is always like the best-selling single handset is always that Apple phone. So, both models are working. It's kind of hard to say.
Now, next week is Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, which I always found it interesting that they're in Europe, that they're doing it
Barcelona,
there. In Barcelona. I always found that.
Place.
What are you hoping to see? Is there anything? I know we're going to get Windows 8 information, but and we're probably going to see the beta of it. But what else other than that are we looking to see? I know a lot of people are saying quad core ice cream sandwich phones.
I don't care about stuff like that.
Yeah,
but no, I my understanding is there's not going to be a lot of Windows Phone news. All the primary players for Windows 8 are there, and we're going to be there regardless of the beta. So, There's going to be something around Windows 8, aside from the beta, I think. So I'm excited about that stuff, but I'm curious whether we're going to see anything. You mentioned, I think you have here in the notes something about possible, iPad Office. I don't expect it to be released, but it would be nice if there was some kind of a.
But it is real. I mean, this is happening.
It's definitely happening. That shot of Office supposedly on the iPad was fake, by the way, but Office is absolutely coming to the iPad. It's just a question of when. I mean, I have a source who I don't know very well, and thus I can't, speak to the accuracy of this. But their information about various stuff related to Office had an Office iPad happening as late as 2013, and that it would be tied to the Office 15 stuff. The next version of Office.
Well, because the next version of and Windows 8 is going to be concentrating on the cloud as well. So I think this kind of ties in, right?
Yeah, I think what you're going to see with Office, a very smart thing I think from Microsoft, is that they're going to basically offer free or next to free versions of Office that are kind of functionally similar across like the web-based version, that starter version they give away on PCs, the iPad version, and possibly other mobile versions. Microsoft has a version that runs on Windows Phone, for example. And so I think those things are all going to kind of parallel each other.
By the way, the Microsoft apps on the iPad are stunning.
Yeah, they're actually really nice.
I mean, the UI and the way they look, they're done really well for a company that's, competing. They make really nice apps. I mean,
Yep. And it speaks, I think, to what's going to be possible in Windows 8. It's like in the early days of the PC industry, Microsoft kind of cut their teeth with the mouse and GUI stuff on the Mac, and then did their own work later on Windows. And maybe now what we're seeing is, let's figure out this touch stuff on the popular platform of the day, and then when Windows 8 overtakes that, we'll be set up for that because we started to understand that.
And the beta, we're expecting it when? In about 4 days?
Yeah, the 29th.
Oh, man, I can't wait for that. I'm very excited.
Yeah,
Paul knows how excited I am for that. I keep hounding him for information.
Yeah, I'm prepping a very large number of articles. Let's put it that way.
Some of the things to expect is LG is going to be releasing the Optimus 4X, which is a 4.7-inch HD display screen with ice cream sandwich, and it's going to run a quad-core Tegra 3 processor. It's going to be 1280 by 720 IPS display, 1 gig of RAM. That's the big phone from LG. I'm just going down a list here. The Optimus 3D Max.
I don't like the name of Optimus.
I don't either. I really don't.
It's like a dumb thing to complain about. But
yeah. It's going to have a dual-core 1.2 gigahertz, 4.3-inch screen, 3D display, 3D WVGA display. You know what? This is a big mistake. Don't do it. And don't buy it. You don't need a 3D phone. You really don't.
No. I briefly bought one of those 3DS, 3D, whatever the 3D thing.
And by the way, this is what we're talking about. It's going to be running Android 2.3.
Fantastic.
So here we go. 2012, ice cream sandwich is out, and these phones are not going to have ice cream sandwich. This is going to be upgradable. And then we're going to have the original Optimus LTE, which is running Android 2.3 as well. Then the L series. I don't know about that. Then we're going to get the Miracle, which is a Windows Phone 7.5 phone.
From LG?
LG, yes. LG is releasing the Miracle.
I wonder if that's going to be a U.S. phone.
Let's see. Rumors are being called. It's going to be called the Miracle or the Fantasy.
Yeah, I don't know anything about that.
And then HTC will be putting the Endeavor.
It's like they're like launching ships.
Yeah.
We're
the
going to war.
The Vial.
Jesus.
Is that right?
The LG blood sample.
The blood sample. The Galaxy Ace 2 by Samsung. The Galaxy Mini 2, which is a smaller phone. It's going to run a 3.27-inch display. The Galaxy S Blaze 4G. The Galaxy Note 10.1, which that looks really nice, by the way.
The Note 10.1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which
they have too many of these things,
Then Nokia will be doing the Lumia 910.
And I think there's going to be more than that. I think Nokia is going to have some low-end phones for emerging markets.
Yeah, the 910, the 610, the Nokia 808 Pure View. I don't know. Well, that's I guess running Symbian.
Great.
Then white Lumia 900, and then Sony's expected to get aggressive this year with a couple of their Android-based phones.
And maybe Windows Phone.
Ooh.
Supposedly with a hardware keyboard. Haven't seen one of those in a while.
The hard keyboards. And then ZTE's releasing it, and then a bunch of other stuff nobody really cares about.
Well, unless you live in China, in which case it probably is pretty exciting.
I don't care about it. And an NEC. I mean, there's a lot of international stuff. And then there's a tiny little thing about RIM saying nothing. Poor RIM. So, I mean, I guess it's the quad-core phone thing that people are going to be excited about. We need quad-core phones.
Do we, though?
I just want the phone to work.
Yeah. I mean, it's bad enough with LTE. I mean, I can only imagine how bad a quad-core processor is going to impact the battery. I'm not sure we need it. I've never used a modern smartphone and never thought, wow, this would be great if it was a little faster.
I'll tell you, Paul, I've turned LTE off on my phone.
Yeah,
I'm getting like 3 days battery.
That's crazy.
I mean, it's phenomenal. The battery, because it's a big battery. So I've turned LTE off. I've turned 3G off if I'm in the house. I'm just running on Wi-Fi, and it's great.
I like that you have this choice, right? I mean, Apple guys will say, that's why we didn't put 4G in the 4S. To which I would say, but you could turn off 4G. I mean, wouldn't you rather have it and have the option? I mean, I'm not a huge fan of the phone, per se.
Which phone? The
one you have.
The one I have, yeah.
The Nexus Galaxy.
I like it. Again, I'm not in love with it. I don't love anything. I'm very critical of my devices, and I love it for about a week, and that's why I never do my reviews for the first 10 days, because you're kind of in this love affair with the phone. When the honeymoon is over, that's when I do my reviews, which makes it.
Tell you though, I've been using this Samsung Focus S since the launch, probably first week of November, and I have an iPhone 4S and I have that Galaxy Nexus, and I always go back to this phone. I really like it a lot. I wish the camera's a little better. It's good. But I really like it. It's got great. The battery life is fine. I guess
it's a 4G or it's not.
Yeah, well, it's like HSPD. Whatever it is, HSPA 4G.
Well, you know what it is, Paul. I didn't think I would need the 4G until last Tuesday. Since we didn't do a show, I had a meeting, and it was a pretty important meeting. It's a partnership thing we're going to be doing in the future. And I had to show them what we were doing. I just pulled up the feed, and I had never done that. On 3G, it never worked properly. I can never pull up the feed where it looks, good. I was on 4G. I had full bars. That means I had 20 megabits up and down, which is crazy if you think about the mobile phone, when most people barely have 1 megabit upload at this point. I'm getting 20 on this phone with 4G. I pulled it up. I pulled up the feed. I'm like, here it is. And they were really impressed. I'm like, wow, it looks great. That was the first time it came in handy. Yeah, I'm like, yeah, I know. It looks great, yeah. But it was the first time that I actually used 4G and it came in handy. So, yeah, you're right. I like the option of having it, and then if I don't need it, I can turn it off. Yeah. Yep. So we'll see what happens.
I wish there were more of them. I mean, you were talking about fragmentation. I mean, it's still the only phone that ships with that system. It's kind of bizarre, months into this, but yeah, that's where we're at.
What can you do? So Mobile World Congress, the only thing that you're excited about is Windows 8.
Well, yeah. I mean, the Windows 8 beta stuff, the consumer preview, is sort of a sideshow to Mobile World Congress. It's not actually happening at Mobile World Congress. But I know those guys were there anyway for Mobile World Congress. So I'm thinking there's going to be something. Windows 8 certainly has a lot of technology in it that's much like a mobile phone. It has like the cellular data stuff built right in, and it's smart about data usage and all that kind of stuff. It will switch seamlessly off of cellular if Wi-Fi is available and all that kind of stuff. So, maybe there'll be some kind of announcement around just Windows 8, just as a mobile device. I'm hoping there's something, that unrelated to the beta, some other.
What's interesting to me, Paul, and I guess this is a topic for Tuesday, and we could go more into it this week, but why are we not seeing more laptops with 4G built in?
Right.
And especially with these Ultrabooks. I mean, if you look at it, the Ultrabook's purpose is that it's super easy. It's kind of this new way of having a laptop and thinking about, the way you perceive a laptop. It's always been smaller, and now this is the next evolutionary step in the laptop and the form factor of the laptop. Why don't we see it?
Because I don't think it's seamless in the current version of Windows. I think that Windows 8 is going to be the one that puts this over the top.
Yeah.
So that stuff's all built in. It works just like a smartphone. It's kind of neat. If you've ever popped a SIM into a laptop and use it with Windows 7, I mean, you got to, typically those guys provide the software and it's a hokey kind of a thing. Or maybe use one of those, I have a USB dongle I can plug in and get on a 3G network. It's like anything else. It's nice to have, but
it doesn't work right.
It's separate. It's like this other thing.
Yeah. So maybe with the next version, they're going to be they're going to elaborate if it's built in and how it functions. I guess
it is built in, and it will be much nicer.
Yeah.
It will be a much nicer experience. Or if you add it later, you can still use the software built into Windows. So it'll just be a seamless thing, and I think that's going to put it over the top.
Very cool. Paul, it is time for our picks of the week. I don't know if you've ever done a pick of the week.
No, not with you. I haven't.
Not with me. Do you want to go first?
Sure.
All right. Let me let's see how professional I am and if I can pull this lower third up. Let's see. There we go. Oh, look at that. So seamless. Now it says picks of the week. It's a different show. Paul, what is your pick of the week?
It's a nice font. Is that like the Planet of the Apes font? Or what is that?
I don't know. Suncast in our chat room. Suncast does all our stuff. Suncast, what font is that?
It's good.
It's impactful. That's what I think.
There you go. So I wrote about this today, and this is kind of a cool thing, but OnLive, the company that does the online game service, right, and has the online OnLive game system, which is for delivering 3D modern video games from over the cloud, right, from their data centers, recently released something called OnLive Desktop. I think they released the first version back in January, and it's a way to access a Windows desktop from your iPad. And it works surprisingly well. I mean, the interesting thing about it is it's not like a remote desktop solution that you see for the iPad, where you're accessing your own computer. You're accessing one of OnLive's computers up in the cloud in their data center, and they have it pre-configured with some of the core Microsoft Office apps like Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. They have online storage. They have sync to your desktop. And so, for people who can travel with the iPad, but occasionally need to get back to, to get into Windows to do Word or whatever. This is a very interesting solution, and it works really well. But the big change this week is they added a plus version of it. That's $5 a month. They've added Adobe Reader to it for actually Adobe Reader is now added to the free version, for PDF. The paid version gets two features that are kind of incredible. One of them is Flash, so you can do all the Flash stuff on the iPad.
So now you have Flash on your iPad. I mean, just for that alone, for many people, it's valuable.
Yep. Yeah, very. And by the way, well, it's cheap. It's not free. It's $5 a month. So very interesting. But the huge thing they've added, and it's kind of a crazy kind of a techie thing, but the back end connection to those desktops on the paid version is 1 megabit. I'm sorry. No, it's not 1 megabit. It's a 1 gigabit.
1 gigabit.
Which is probably hundreds of times as fast as the connection you have at home on your cable connection. It's incredibly fast. And you see that in the performance of things like browsing the web or playing an HD video full screen on YouTube, which, by the way, is incredible and works really well. So it really speeds up the whole process. Sort of like the gaming system that they have, the service relies on sending video to to the machine. So you need a Wi-Fi connection or a 4G connection for good performance there, and then some sort of interface for touching with it. So I haven't tried this, but I suspect if you're one of those people that has a the stylus devices you can buy for the iPad, that might be a slightly better experience for drawing in Paint.
By the way, I'm logging in now. And it's telling me my internet is not sufficient to provide good video.
Really?
Yeah.
I've not seen that already. Yeah.
I'm getting all these errors. Let me see. Maybe I'm logged into the other router upstairs. I don't have. Wow, that's weird. Okay.
And by the way, if maybe you tried out OnLive earlier because you wanted to see what the video game thing was like, your same login works. Like, so if you already have that account, it works for this as well.
Yeah,
it's
web
pretty
browser.
incredible. I mean, it's surprising how well this thing works.
I'm trying to log in now. I think it'll work now. But the web browser really makes it valuable, and it's slowly becoming a full-fledged Windows computer, right? I mean, they're slowly adding these features, and that's what they had initially said when they launched at CES. They had stated that, I think we spoke about this once before, how and I think I previewed this once, but I was really curious about how it's going to be when they put a web browser and how you're going to be able to do more stuff. And I guess they're getting their net. Oh, here I am. Look, it's Windows 7.
Yeah, and
Here,
you
so
need,
let me see if I can hold
obviously you
the
need
camera.
connectivity. It doesn't work offline, but this thing with a Bluetooth keyboard and perhaps one of those styluses, all of a sudden it gets really interesting. I mean, it's possible.
There you go. Look, you could.
Yeah.
You know what my gripe with this is? When you're in Word, I wish it would use the iPad's keyboard.
Yeah, right. So Windows, a lot of people don't know this, but Windows 7 does have touch and multi-touch capabilities. So the software keyboard that comes up in this is the one that Windows provides, right?
By
Which
the
is
way,
what you're referring
the
to.
browser's working for me, and I don't have. I have the free version.
Yeah, no, it still works. I'm just saying if you pay for it, the performance is dramatically better.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, it still works. I mean, in fact, I'm sure you could watch YouTube videos and stuff. I'm sure it would be fine. But you're guaranteed this bandwidth if you pay for it. They're going to have a pro version that is going to be a little bit more and offers a lot more storage. They're going to have an enterprise version for managed, businesses and all that. I mean, they're really kind of going whole hog on this. And hopefully in the future, if the iPad 3 comes out and has much higher resolution, Windows 8 running on this thing would actually be pretty incredible, I would imagine. I think the only limit right now is 1024 by 768 is okay. Not necessarily what you want for Windows 8 because it won't let you do the side-by-side multitasking, but you can kind of see where it's going. It's very, very interesting.
Yeah.
So if the iPad does most of what you need and you can be online, that's a pretty good choice.
I mean, I guess this is also an alternative to people who don't want to go to my PC and they don't want to do remote access. This is a computer on the cloud that's set up for you. And
OnLive, of course, is handling all of the stuff in the back end. So they're upgrading the applications, or upgrading the OS. They're doing all this stuff. You don't have to manage anything. It's again, I think for power use, the people listening to the show, or people listening to our show, are going to want a Windows PC. I mean, obviously, but I think there's a huge class of people that the iPad pretty much does what they want, but maybe occasionally they do want the full version of Office for whatever reason. They have to make a presentation, write a letter, whatever it is. There you go. It's free.
Yeah, really cool. Great pick, Paul. My pick this week is I'm on a Mac, and I hate QuickTime. Sorry, Paul. Sorry. God, I apologize already. I use a Mac for everyday computing, and I absolutely hate QuickTime. I think it's useless.
Oh, you should see it on Windows.
Oh, it's even more useless on Windows. It's just like iTunes on Windows. I don't know what's worse.
I think it's officially been labeled an atrocity.
I don't know what's worse, QuickTime on Windows or iTunes on Windows.
Sure, it's right. They're both about the same.
So I discovered a player a couple years ago called VLC, and I use it on Windows as well. And it's a great player. It plays almost every format. It's great for the Mac because you're able to play WMV files without having to get some crazy codec. It plays every single possible format that there is. And They just came out with a new version that they've updated, and it looks great. They have this nice border around it. They've kind of made it into like this all-around media player. And an iTunes-like kind of environment also, where you could queue stuff up, and you could also listen to radio stations. You could pull up videos. It's a great software, and they've gotten better. I've always been a fan of this. Do you use VLC, Paul?
Yeah, I was actually going to tell you, I do use VLC, and there's lots of reasons, of performance and all that stuff. On the PC, QuickTime has no notion of the power management features of the OS. So you'll be watching it on a laptop or a tablet, and the screen will go dim because QuickTime doesn't alert the OS. By the way, I'm playing a video. But a VLC does. But the other thing that they do that's crucial is I rip H.264 files from DVD movies. Some DVDs support like soft captioning, which QuickTime works with, but some of them use a form of captioning called VobSub. And if you VobSub captions won't play in QuickTime, you can't see them, but they play fine in VLC. So VLC is the one player that basically does everything. So yeah,
I like the internet channels that you could add, and also the local network. So everything is there; it's right in front of you, and they make it very easy to access your network streaming files. You could access a lot of the internet radio stations. You could also do, I think, video. You could put in the queue so if you have a feed like we could be viewed on VLC, you could have it just there on the side, and you could play our video in VLC rather than having to go to our website.
Right.
I actually really like VLC, and I've always used it. The only problem with VLC that I've had, and I'm just going to put it out there, and I don't know if anybody else has experienced this, on my Mac, I noticed that it cuts out like the last second of the video or audio.
That's funny.
And if it's a short clip, like if I'm playing a sound clip, it'll just cut the last second out. I don't know if anybody else has experienced that. I guess not. Maybe it's just me.
I have not.
But VLC is pretty much, in my opinion, one of the best players out there, especially for the Mac. Much better than QuickTime. And on Windows, too, it's a phenomenal player that many people like, and I also like, so that's my pick. VLC 2.0, the latest version of VLC. Do you remember when they said I think it was like a year ago, that they were going to stop development? There was a rumor. Yeah. There was a rumor a while ago that they were going to stop development for VLC on the Mac, and obviously it's not true. They're developing, and it's pretty good.
No, I love it. This is like a dumb thing, but on the way on this trip, I watched movies on my Windows 8 tablet, and this is another case where it just works better. You know, when you touch the screen in QuickTime, it will pause the movie. So in this one, you can touch the screen; it's no problem. The controls go away. It just works better across the board. I love it.
All right, Paul. I appreciate you coming on Tech News Weekly. I know it's not in our contract for you to do this show. I know that Paul Thurrott only does What the Tech, and that's the only thing that our 3-year deal says that you're going to do. But I mean, I appreciate you, doing this.
No problem at all. Thank you for accommodating my schedule. Sorry about that.
No, it's perfectly fine. Next week we'll be back to our regular schedule, right? Tuesday, 4 p.m. East for What the Tech. Mm-hmm. We're going to be back, and I think what we should do. I do want to go more into what manufacturers, what these computers could add to kind of merge the two, the desktop and the tablet.
Yeah, what's the right approach for that?
Yeah, what's the right approach? What they could do to kind of ease us into it, rather than just throwing it in our face and saying, "Here it is, accept it, and this is all you're going to get." I think we could cover that a little bit more, because there's a lot of interesting stuff happening. But we do our show every Wednesday, 4 p.m. East, for What the Tech. You could also check out Paul's website, winsupersite.com. Most of the time I rip Paul off and I just cover whatever he's covering on his site, because I get lazy. I'm honest, Paul. I'm really honest. I'm trying to go to winsupersite.com, and
I just show up at 2 o'clock or whatever time we do it, 4 o'clock, I guess.
By the way, your website's not loading.
Fantastic.
I brought it down. I brought your website down. That's the power of the GFQ network. winsupersite.com. Also check out Paul on Windows Weekly every Thursday at 2 p.m. East. We'll be back next week with more Tech News Weekly. Good night, everybody. Have a great weekend.